Warning: these social media platforms may be hazardous to your health. Censorship kills. Pain coming. This has been a PSA by Breaking Spectre. Good afternoon, everybody. How we doing? Spectre here on the 5x5 channel. Good to have you aboard here this afternoon. Hey, it's Saturday, it's springtime. Spring is certainly in the air. Weather is finally starting to shape up to where you can finally get a few things planted, and that's going to be the premise of what I'm going to talk about here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about a process called Hugelkultur, what it is, and possible inspiration for your permaculture garden. So that's what I'm going to focus on here today. Hopefully, if you get a little bit of a green thumb here, maybe you'll feel inspired to do this yourself. And I'll share some details of what I just got done doing here towards the very end. That being said, let's jump right in. Out of insteading.com, this is an article that dates back to the first part of the year here, talking about Hugelkultur, what it is, and inspiration for your permaculture garden. And of course, there's many different methods, this being one of them. Instead of putting those small branches, leaves, and grass clippings in bags by the curbside, build a Hugelkultur bed instead. Simply mound logs, branches, leaves, grass clippings, straw, cardboard, petroleum-free newspaper, manure, compost, or whatever other biomass and organic matter you have available, top with soil, and plant your veggies or perennial plants. What you'll get in return is a natural, living garden, mound culture that will provide your veggies, fruits, and herbs with a host of beneficial nutrients. So what's Hugelkultur, and why Hugelkultur? Well, Hugelkultur, it's a German word meaning hill culture or hill mound. The benefits of Hugelkultur beds are many. Here are just a few advantages of this gardening technique. The gradual decay of rotting wood is a consistent source of long-term nutrients for the plants. A large bed might give out a constant supply of nutrients for 20 years, or even longer if you use only hardwoods. The composting wood also generates heat, which should extend the growing season. Soil aeration increases as those branches and logs break down, meaning the bed will be no-till long-term. The large logs, branches, and other woodly material act like a sponge. Rainwater is stored and then released during drier times. Actually, you may never need to water your Hugel bed again after the first year, except during long-term droughts. Sequester carbon into the soil. So how to make a Hugelkultur bed? On a sod lawn, Sepp Holzer, Hugelkultur expert, recommends cutting out the sod, digging a 1-foot deep trench and filling the trench with logs and branches, then cover the logs with upside-down turf. And here that is kind of depicted. And of course, obviously, you would need some fairly decent space to be able to do that in your lawn or garden or wherever you would opt to put said Hugelkultur. On top of the turf, add grass clippings, seaweed, compost, aged manure, straw, green leaves, mulch, etc. And from the permaculture book by Sepp Holzer via Permaculture magazine, you can kind of see some of the respective beds, and more examples will follow here. It says in the photo above, you'll see a Hugel and traditional bed comparison. Cantaloupe plants from the same seed packet, the Hugelkultur bed on the right, was planted 2 weeks after the traditional bed on the left. And that was a photo courtesy of Marcella Wurtzenall. And here's another example, more height, more surface area, more for plants. And here's a steep Hugel bed. The more wood and organic matter inside your Hugelkultur, the less water it will need. Possibly no supplemental water after establishment. With a larger size, more heat will be generated, and obviously it will last longer. and that's out of SHTF Preparedness. Some other examples here. Sepp Holzer recommends steep hugelkultur beds to avoid compaction from increased pressure over time. Steep beds mean more surface area in your garden for plants, and the height makes easy harvesting. The greater the mass, the greater the water retention benefits. Image from Permaculture via Permaculture magazine. And again, you can kind of see the required space for said planting. Height can be decreased by partially burying the bed. Final bed size 75 foot long, 4 foot wide trench. Finish size 6 foot at the base, separated by 2 foot access paths. Wood height is 8 to 12 inches on tilled clay. Finish size 30 inches high from bottom of the trench. Rob is making beds for potatoes, and he feels that they will last up to 10 years. Interesting read and photos courtesy of One Straw Rob. So lots of good examples here. I'll be sure to put the link down in the description so that you guys can check this out for yourself. One Plant Hugelkultur by Eric Markov. Start small. Whenever you plant, add some wood logs, add compost, and one could also treat an old below-ground tree-level stump as a hugel, as the old stump will bring up water and decompose, adding nutrients to the soil. And here's some more. So here's 14 of the world's best hugelkultur beds. Again, this one we saw previously, I believe, hugelkultur in Ontario, Canada. Obviously, you can see a lot of the twigs and branches and that thrown in there. Hugel bed in Ontario, Canada by Travis Phillip, wood branches stacked about a foot high. Hugelkultur bed in Ontario, Canada, as above, branches covered with manure mixed with hay, 4 to 6 inches. Sod was packed into random holes. And if you visit GreenShireEcoFarms.com, they also have a video tour of their forest hugelkultur garden. Here you see a lettuce-covered hugelkultur. Hugelkultur beds covered in lettuce. More photos and explanation how they work can be found at Rich Soil. Here's one built out of pallets. Here's a video showing fairly large logs. A row of hugelkultur beds, several with walking paths, water directing hugelkultur. Small hugelkultur garden, plenty to choose from there. Framed hugelkultur bed, which is fairly similar to one that I just got done building myself here, and I'll show you here momentarily. Hugelkultur with bed frame, or with frame, the complete garden can be seen at New Way of Gardening Experiment. Dugout hugelkultur, lots of logs and that placed in there. Kind of looks like a grave of sorts for wood stumps and whatnot. Hugel bed dug in clay with logs put in vertically, next branches and loads of wood chips. The top 6 inches will be wood chips and dirt. This bed will store water and give nutrients for many years to come. Photos, more information found at Low Cost Vegetable Gardens. Here you see a branch-lined hugelkultur, kind of boxed in as well. Here's the building of one as well. Circular hugelkultur bed. Yet another. Got some chickens stomping around there. This rounded hugelkultur bed is great for being able to access the plants. This design also makes watering easier. Hugelkultur gardens from Idaho. Here we see some surrounded by some stone. Hugelkultur beds by John in Idaho. You can find out more in this hugelkultur at Permies. Blooming hugelkultur bed. There you see another example there. Hugelkultur bed by WSU Master Recycler Composter in Lewis County, Washington. The stones are sure to keep extra heat in the bed. Image originally found at lewiscountyrecycles.org/projects. And here we got a straw bale hugelkultur. Straw bale gardens require less soil, less water, and hold heat, and as the straw breaks down, nutrients feed the plants. Combining a straw surround with a hugel interior topped by lasagna layering is an excellent idea for an area with poor quality soil. So again, here you can see plenty of examples. I'll leave the link. You guys can check them out. But again, here you can kind of see the lay of it. 2 inches of straw, leaves, rather seedless mulch. 5 inches of well-aged compost, 4 inches manure, 8 to 12 inches of hay, etc. Newspaper, soils, slashed or mowed vegetation, soil surface, roots, cracks, moistened soil. Obviously, you can layer these as you see fit. Again, here you can find out various trees that work best in hugelkultur, etc., etc. Again, I'll go ahead and leave the link. But most importantly, I want to leave you with this video here that's going to highlight what I just got done doing. And, you know, you can build these as cheaply or as expensively as you see fit. But here's what I just got done doing. Take a listen. Hey everybody, Spectre here. I want to walk you through a little process I recently went through here on how to build some raised beds, and it was based on a video Annette shared with me here in a meeting not too long ago on how to build a raised bed in 1 hour for under $100 from the Goshen Farm and Gardens channel on YouTube. And this project was interesting to say the least, because this is in a time where lumber prices net are through the roof, as well as steel prices, which is the general construction of this video. And so this video is going to show you how to be a little bit resourceful on how to find materials, where to look on the likes of the Craigslist and marketplaces net on Facebook. Perhaps you guys can find some similar materials, similarly priced, and build a fairly resourceful raised bed. And of course, this particular process and that is going to rely upon what is called Hugelkultur. A Hugelkultur means hill culture or hill mound. It's literally a raised garden bed that is built from the bottom up with logs, sticks, and branches, wood chips, grass clippings, manure, leaves, food scraps, eggshells, coffee grounds, basically everything you would put into a compost heap. And that's the concept we're going to follow here today. In my particular case, I'm not building these perfectly square as in the video net from Goshen Farm, so I'm actually having to use a little bit of geometry to compensate for the taper of the sidewalk and that leading to the steps on the old porch here. So if you're afraid of doing a little bit of math, a little geometry, some back cuts, things of that nature, maybe you want to find a different location. But in my particular case, this is what I chose to do. And in this case, I'm using 2x4 construction here, 12-foot lengths in that, as well as 8-foot lengths. General layout is about 11 foot by about 2.5 foot, so roughly 22.5 square feet, and you can kind of see that in the layout on either side of the sidewalk. Now here I'm showing a side shot of the footprint of the beds, as I'm not doing this on level ground. I actually do have a little bit of a fall off from the top of the bed near the steps, clear out to the end of the sidewalk, which is roughly about 8-10 inches in fall off. And I struggled with whether or not I wanted to try and fancy it up and hold everything square, level the top of the beds off relative to the taper, or just hold the bed square. And obviously I opted to go the easy route, keep the bed square and not worry about the taper and everything else. So that's what went out. Also, real quick, I'll point out that I used general construction screws, about 2.5 inches in length, to hold everything together. Obviously, you can use 12, 16 penny nails, depending on if you're using an air nailer or hand nailing as you see fit. Now here you can see that I've got the beds pretty well framed up. Everything is put together, and you'll notice that I've got things stained as well, which is probably a good idea to protect your wood. In this particular case, I used regular yellow pine. Opted not to use pressure treated. Obviously, if you're dealing with foods and want to keep everything natural, you don't want any bleed over into your soil from any sort of chemicals. So you can treat your wood. In this case, I used some stain in that tended to match what we had on the deck of the old porch, so holds everything nice and neat. In the meantime, you'll also see that I started to hang the corrugated panels net on there. In this case, I cut some 12-foot panels down to 11 foot for the long side, about 2.5 foot for the short side. Everything's coming together nicely here. And luckily, I was able to find some corrugated panels net for relatively cheap, about 10 panels net, 12-foot length for about 120 bucks. About a third the cost that you can get for new, at least at this point in time. So you can see everything coming together nicely here, and the construction is coming along. Here I'm showing that the beds are largely done by way of construction. All the panels net are hung. Ended up 5-paneling it rather than trying to deal with a bend in that for my taper. So five panels wasn't too bad a deal. I used a little 1.25 screws net to fix everything to the frame. Also of note, the panels are about 26 inches wide, and the frame in that I built for the beds is 27 inches high. So that being said, I left about a 1-inch delta from the top of the framework down to the panels so that you don't ultimately slice yourself up on the sharp panels net when doing planting, dealing with your vegetables and whatnot. So again, construction largely done at this point. So with construction done, now the fun part, compost. In my case, I had about a 40-50 gallon tote sitting around that I had already filled with some leaves and things from the fall time, general cleanup, twigs, branches, bark, grass clippings, you name it, from all the typical fall time stuff. It had collected some rainwater and that in the springtime here, so ended up having a pretty good brew of stuff going on in that barrel. Ended up wheeling it over, put about half in one bed, half in the other, and lo and behold, as I was doing that, a friend of mine stopped by. It has some chickens, and just happened to mention that he had some old chicken cleanings net from the old coop, and so off I went with about 6 5-gallon buckets, filled those babies up, and got a little chicken refuse, dumped half in one, half in the other, and away we went. So you obviously can choose to use whatever you see fit, but in this particular case, everything was free, so good to go. Now that I got the compost in, now it's time to get some dirt. And in my case, we had some weather in recent days, so I ended up having to wait a day or two before I could get materials just for things to dry out a little bit from local guy I was getting some fill dirt and that from. Now you can kind of see that I've got it filled about halfway here, which is about half a cubic yard by way of the old skid steer filling the old truck up. So looks like I'm probably going to have to go back, get another scoop full in that from the old skid steer, get that thrown in there, and we should be good to go. Double that, and we'll have her pretty well licked for both beds. Now that all the dirt's in, planting time. Here you can see I got some hot pepper plants in that, got some onions, got some tomatoes in that planted, a few more onions, and of course I've got some cucumbers in that down toward the end of the beds, and that's bed number 1. And over in bed number 2, I got some green peppers, bell peppers, got a few more onions planted here. We got a couple zucchini in that planted, a few more onions, one more tomato plant, I believe, and of course I got a couple more cucumbers in that. And now the fun part, we'll get a trellis built between the two and let them climb up between the beds, and away we go. So that's going to do it for everything planted, start to finish. Hope you enjoyed it. Alright, well there you have it. That kind of lays it out as to how I built mine here, some of the projects that I've been working on behind the scenes here for the last week or so. Again, highlighting the fact that material prices are relatively high. I would recommend trying to find them on the cheap if you possibly can. I don't know that the old adage that the guy put in there building a bed for $100 is even possible at this point. Again, given the price of wood new or steel new, anything along those lines. So you might try and do it on the cheap with whatever materials you have available, whatever space you have. One thing I will say that you might consider that I did not add to the video is that given the length of these, you may consider putting some cross brace supports in that midway through. Obviously, if you're putting a lot of dirt and whatnot in the middle and trying to constrain it via bed fashion, a lot of weight in that is added and can tend to try and push the sides out a little bit, so you can consider putting wood in or using chain or whatever to try and hold the sides in so it doesn't lose its form. Give it a little bit more structural rigidity as well. Alright, well that's going to do it for this episode. Just wanted to cut a quick and dirty one here just to show some of the things working on behind the scenes here. And of course, given that it is springtime, planting season upon us, commodity prices on the rise, food prices on the rise, it probably isn't going to hurt to have one of these available at your fingertips to be able to grow your own stuff. So, that being said, that's going to do it for now. Take care, God bless, and we'll see you back on